audience is astounding. But let's end this. There's nothing more tiresome than a stalemate.
Alrighty, what is going on, everyone? So today I'm excited to announce that my guest is none other than Tobin in The Walking Dead, Miche in Attack on Titan, and Beerus in Dragon Ball Super. Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Douglas, how are you today?
I'm well, Kyle. How you doing, man? That
Doing
was
well.
an amazing intro. You kind of hit three iconic roles right off the bat. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And I'm good, man. I'm good.
Cool. How long have you been acting for? Not necessarily voice acting, but just acting.
Right. You know, I was in high school in the early 1990s. That'll give you an idea of how old I am. And I kind of that's where I got the bug. If they call it the acting bug. I was completing my fourth year of high school, had a really terrific theater department at my school. I was not the only person to come out of that department. In fact, there's one guy that's far more famous than me, and his name is Jim Parsons, and he did a show called The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
And he came out of my same high school, same graduating class. So I was a guy that didn't start acting in my freshman year. I wasn't like a theater guy during high school. I certainly credit Jim and some of the other folks that were already in the theater world of our school at that time because I thought they were so good. I saw them working and doing various plays. I think they did a production of The Skin of Our Teeth. There's something about being on stage and chewing on dialogue and performing with other actors. So eventually I kind of decided to get involved. And like I said, that was early 90s. So we're talking, 25, 30 years? Yeah. So I went to the University of Houston School of Theater not long after that. Mid-late 1990s, I was doing a lot of Houston theater. And one of our audience members one night was one of the directors for ADV Films. They were a huge name in anime distribution from about the late 1990s to all the way through the mid-aughts, and then they kind of went bankrupt for a bit, and then the pieces that used to be ADV Films became what we now know as Sentai Filmworks. But that's how I got my start in voice acting. Is I was a theater guy, and it really was just kind of a gig. It was a way of making a little bit of money. Doing what we do, it was, it's an acting job, and when you're just starting out, you're not making much money acting at all, and it's not clear that you ever will. And so it was really great to have an opportunity at that time, to act and kind of start to make a little bit of a living out of it. So
was there like a specific role that was your sort of breakout role when that started earning money, or was it kind of a little thing that kind of happened down the line?
It's an interesting question because I had a lot of really good roles when I started to really get busy with ADV Films. There were a lot of roles that I loved, but there's two things. I did a lot of titles that were not what they call A titles. These would be the marquee titles that they put a lot of, marketing budget into. I did a show called Louis the Rune Soldier. In fact, I think they just released it as Rune Soldier, but great show. Fantasy, epic, kind of kooky, it's in that very kind of Lord of the Rings kind of realm of magicians and then there's this band of girl warriors who are treasure hunters, but they need a magician, so they recruit Louis. They find out he's basically a drunk from that they meet at the local bar, this young guy, but he happens to be a magician. And it's all played up for comedy. I loved doing that. I mean, it was fun. I was part of the cast of Bubblegum Crisis 2040, which was kind of a big deal. That was a big deal title at the time. Gasaraki was one. We did Street Fighter 2, but not the North American release. We did the release. They had the license for the UK release.
Okay.
And so I don't know where else in the world they had the license or where that went. But here's the thing that's interesting. At roughly the same time as ADV was becoming a big deal, there was this one other show that was becoming really popular. And it was called Dragon Ball. And it's funny because Funimation was a company that started for the specific purpose of dubbing Dragon Ball and releasing it. It's it. I mean, that is the origin story of Funimation. It's all about Dragon Ball. And Dragon Ball went through the roof. And ADV did quite well, but they didn't really have a Dragon Ball to put them on the map in that way. There were a lot of careers that were started during my tenure at ADV Films. I mean, names like Monica Rial and Chris Patton, Lucy Christian. These were all names that were rubbing elbows at the studio, going from place to place. And that's, back in the day when you did have to go to a studio, and there would be, and at their busiest, they had like 8 or 10 studios running at the same time, and you would show up there, and there would be a group of actors coming in and out all day long, and it was a fun time. It was a fun time.
Do you remember the first character that you played in Dragon Ball? Was it a side character or was it a main character?
Well, yeah, so Dragon Ball came much later for me. I mean, I wasn't part of the original cast of Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z. So all of that I just described was from Houston, which is about 4 hours roughly by car. It's about 3 to 4 hours south of Dallas, Texas, where I am now. And Funimation was here in the Dallas area. Right. So when I relocated here I guess it's been about 12 years ago now, I started working with Funimation, and eventually during that time they were doing the Dragon Ball Z Kai, the re-release of Dragon Ball Z, right? At that time, they cast me as King Cold. And so I played King Cold. I think I played one of the Kais, like a South Kai type character at some point.
Yeah, I did Google it. I don't remember though.
Yeah. It could only have been a one-off, or something, because I haven't returned to that. But I did play King Cold in Dragon Ball Z Kai, which is cool because when the last movie came out, Broly, he figures kind of strongly, if you remember, at the beginning of that film. And of course, Beerus doesn't figure strongly in that film. He has a couple of spots which are cool. And so, I was like, hey, Chris, are you going to use me as King Cold? And I almost had to remind him that I had played that role for him in Kai. And once we had kind of got on the same page, he's like, oh, yeah, you're King Cold. So I was like, cool. Now I have something more to do for this film, which is great. It hopefully kind of cemented my lock on that role. I had been in and out of anime for 20 years. Yeah. I had seen what having a special character in a special show can do for the voiceover career of an actor. It certainly gins up interest in things like conventions and public appearances and interviews. But for me, the cool thing about playing Beerus was just so well written. Like, it's fun to play Beerus. Yeah. It's not always fun to play an anime character. Not all shows are equal, right? And not all characters are well written or lovingly written and crafted. But Beerus is clearly special to Akira Toriyama, and so there's a lot of attention, I think, from the studio side, about how they create that character, how they write for that character. And so for me, it's just really special to be, part of the show, of course, because of its historic importance in anime, but also just because it's such a fun character to play. Yeah. So.
Which one do you sort of have the most fun doing, where it's either an alien kind of character with a weird, wacky voice, or a character that's human with sort of more your natural voice? Which one do you have more fun doing?
Well, it sounds cliche, of course. Beerus is probably, I don't know, he's, like I said before, he's so well written. I have a ton of fun when I do Beerus. Other character types that I've had the most fun with, when I think of my career and fun roles that I've had as a voice actor in anime, anytime I get to do like a crusty detective, I love those roles because they're cinematic in many ways. Yeah. Sometimes there's just something very, that very kind of world weary, close to the mic so that you don't have to, it almost like I'm in a movie, like I'm in an old
noir film.
And Psycho-Pass was a good example of that. It was kind of a sci-fi, very, very Philip Dick kind of show. I literally played an old detective. So I enjoyed that because I enjoyed the show. Now, was voicing that character as fun as voicing Beerus? I don't know, but I enjoyed the show very much, and I liked the character. We haven't even talked about Excel Saga, which was a huge title when it came out 99, 2000, 2001, Jessica Calvello and me and Hilary Haig, but that was a parody. It was a giant satire, the entire show, and it was ridiculous. And I played a foppish but deranged, self-absorbed guy that was wanting to take over the tri-state area. Almost like Doofenshmirtz from Phineas and Ferb. He was, but he was very grand and regal. But the whole show was ridiculous. Right. I did this show with John Swayze, was Wandaba style. I always talk about that show, but it was so kooky. And I played Michael Hanagata, sleazy manager of an all-girls Japanese pop band. And he was trying to get them a gig on the moon. That was his big thing. He spent, the entire series was all about trying to get this young girl Japanese pop band a gig on the moon. And it's a ridiculous premise, and it was a very self-aware show. I get hired a lot for like soldier guys and regal guys. And as I've gotten older, I'm playing more the local village chief, or the king, or the dad, the evil dad, or the good dad. Sometimes I'm like hey, how's it going? I made you something for lunch. I'm the character that the main character, sees like every third episode or something, and I'm in the kitchen, making eggs. So those are okay, but those characters aren't fleshed out.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask which one you preferred, either doing sort of the gruff, angry soldiers or the weird, sort of kooky characters. So that answers
I would say
question.
the gruff, angry soldiers are my least favorite. The ones that I'm probably the most, well, I don't say that, but I think the types of characters that I think some directors, particularly younger directors who don't know me and don't know my work, those are the roles that it's easiest to cast me in. Yeah. Oh, Jason Douglas. I'm a big guy. I'm 6'4", so if you meet me and, I've got this kind of look. And so I get it. But I feel that that's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is more rangy and, comedic, but you'd have to see my demo reel or see some of the other work that I've done maybe to know that. Yeah. And but I think a lot of young directors, they just, I hate to say it, but I mean, I think they get lazy and they cast by looks.
Right.
And so they'll cast an actor who they think looks like the character or is in the range of the character. Matt Greenfield from ADV used to say, if you're having trouble casting a character, find somebody that looks like that character. It'll work. And he was, he's not wrong entirely, but that's when you find yourself in the voice acting career and you feel like you've got a much wider range than you're being seen as, you start to get a bit curmudgeonly about it, which is a self-fulfilling thing, isn't it? Then all of a sudden, we're going to cast him as that crusty, curmudgeonly guy. Like, come on! I can still sound like I'm in my 20s. Why don't you, But there's a lot more actors that are competing to be in this business than when I started, though, man. Yeah. Like, it's crazy.
Well, this
everybody wants to be a voice actor.
Here we go. This is a message to all our casting agents. If you ever see Jason Douglas, you can hire him for something that isn't a gruff soldier. So he's got a lot of range. Give him a chance. A lot of range. I've got footage if you want it. Send it my way. I'll throw you in. I've even got a voice demo up on Vimeo, but it's a few years old. It needs to be updated. When you were auditioning for Beerus, was there much direction in sort of what they wanted him to sound like, or was it just a voice that you came up with that they liked?
The directors that work with me, they kind of know what I bring, and they know my history in the industry, and I don't have an ego. I'll take direction from anybody. I really do. I feel that my performances are often made better if I've got a good director, and I always like to sing the praises of Ian Sinclair because he cast me as Claude in Black Butler 2. Okay. And that was a really important role for that arc, that second season arc. And there was a lot of coaxing that he did to kind of help me. I mean, I could have played him just fine up to a certain level with no direction at all, but I feel like that role for me worked really well because of Ian. because Ian helped me get across the finish line. And I have no ego about saying that. I'm not somebody that's gonna be, oh yeah, I came up with that. I mean, he definitely was someone that I trusted and would love to work with again. Beerus was a character that Chris will tell you, he cast me in part because he'd been working with me and he knew that I sounded like the voice actor that plays Beerus, the Japanese voice actor. And he felt like there was a close semblance there. And the reason he knew that was because he had been working with me on Borderlands for Krieg. So I was doing Krieg at his studio, and we rolled right out of that, and they started getting this Beerus stuff. And Beerus first appeared in one of the video games, and I would be afraid to hear what that Beerus sounds like because we didn't really have a lot of information at all.
Right, yeah.
We didn't have anything to prepare us for what he should sound like. I think the direction was, he's a cat, so be a cat warrior guy. And then when we got the trailer, which was the first thing we got for Battle of Gods, is a trailer, and so we had to voice that. And then it began to make more sense, and we began to lean in a little bit more toward that voice. And I based Beerus on Coriolanus or a King Lear or a Macbeth, right? You know, something like that. But then also this idea of an old warrior. He's not a king that, just was a boy that became a king in a family. I mean, he's like a Henry V in a certain sense, but like farther down the road, Richard III maybe. There's this old soul aspect. So he's regal. He certainly has a certain amount of properness, but for me, he also had this kind of world weariness of having been in 1,000 battles or something. I wanted him to have all of that.
Yeah.
And then the curveball, of course, is that he's a comedic character. He's kind of a straight man in his own comedy. We get to take that guy, that's sort of what might be a stuffy, figure, and we get to, every episode, we get to put him in a new awkward position or, having a new culinary experience, right, that is out of this world. So that's how Beerus, I think, is experiencing. He's already seen it all, he's already done it all, but somehow there's something about Earth and this food and these people that are new and different. So that's kind of Beerus for me, is that, finally something different is happening in his life. He's not waking up once every 40 years to blow something up, like some, Lovecraftian, sleeping giant figure. He's a person, right? And he's having new and interesting experiences. So that's it, Beerus, the tourist.
Yeah, well, that's something that I really like about Beerus, is that normally he's got sort of a deeper, sort of like posh, kind of well-spoken voice,
right.
But then at any moment he can just flip out and go evil. So how do you kind of play a character that's both, like you said, a straight man, but also very dangerous to the characters?
Yeah, well, a truly dangerous figure doesn't have to push. They don't have to push the danger. There's a certain power in quiet and in so Beerus knows how powerful he is. And I think this is great. Again, where the writing really shines is they don't put words in Beerus's mouth that sound like he's trying to show you or tell you how powerful he is. Think about King Cold, or Freezer, or any of. They're always telling you how powerful they are, right? They're always having to remind you that they're going to do something, and Beerus doesn't do that. He doesn't. He knows he doesn't need to. He's a force of nature. A hurricane doesn't need to warn you that it's going to stir some crap up, right?
Yeah, the ambiguity is what sells it a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so he's just powerful sitting there. I mean, he's just powerful when you see him on screen. You as an audience member, you already know what he's capable of. So anything he does or says, I think is interesting and powerful because it reveals that he might have a weakness, but his weakness might just be food at that moment, right? Like and that's again, we just. It's like you said, not knowing or having the ambiguity about it. It is fun to become Beerus the warrior in that moment when he needs to be. Unfortunately for me, we don't. in last few times I've gone in, you just don't see it as much. Those. Now, if they come back with more Dragon Ball Super, I think we may have a chance to see more of Beerus. And I can't tell you, I don't know much about the movie that's coming out, but I have a feeling that it's not a Beerus movie. I have a feeling that it's something else. It is fun to kind of switch on a dime and then just kind of have a little freak out, right? A little meltdown. He doesn't do that in battle, but he certainly does that in his relationships, right? In his interpersonal relations certainly with Bulma, but with Vegeta and Goku and Whis.
Yeah. Yeah, so you did say before, that you don't really know much about Dragon Ball Superhero or the new Dragon Ball Z movie coming out.
Couldn't tell you. I would love to say that I know something. I know that it's called Dragon Ball Super Duper Superhero or something. I mean no disrespect. It's going to be great. In fact, I'm excited about the animation, the stuff that they've put out. I think it looks really good. I think they must be doing a little bit of motion capture. Wow. It's what it seems like. The Goku stuff is looking very fluid and cool, and so that's exciting to see. And I think we're going to see a lot of Piccolo for some reason, and some new android character or characters. Yeah. They haven't shown us anything that would indicate that Beerus or Whis are going to figure strongly. Right. So. It could just be another, here we're gonna zoom over to Beerus for 5 seconds and see what he's laughing about, and then that's it, and then we're gonna move on with the rest of the film. I still think there's some epic Beerus episode in the future, either a film or a story arc, where he is, as all the fans have been asking, when is he going to show his true power? And I think we haven't explored any of that, or whether or not Vegeta and or Goku are being groomed to be the next destroyer. Right. What is this strange symbiotic relationship between Beerus and Whis? Apparently, if you kill one, the other one dies. So, what's that all about? I mean, I think the fact that it's mysterious and we don't know is kind of cool, because it's fun to speculate. But I don't know. Yeah. The answer to your question is I don't know.
I was going to ask. So what can you tell us about it? But if you don't really know, then never mind.
Well, there's a time to ask that question, and it's when the studio starts sending actors out for press junkets, and they tell them what to say. Like, they give you information, or you've already done it, so then you can start to talk about it. So, like, once the actors have started recording, and then they're done recording, and then we're starting to move into, like, okay, it's coming out, then you're going to see a lot more actors that are able to say, okay, here's what's going to be, here's what it's going to be about, and this is what I can tell you. I think the studios love to hold their cards close. They love to surprise us, you and the fans and all of us. They love to surprise us, and they don't want any of that stuff leaking out. They don't. Yeah. They're very, I think, especially sensitive about leaked information. Yeah. And so it's no surprise that we've only been given little drips so far. I mean, there was an entire Comic-Con appearance. Obviously, you probably watched it. Where they were promoting this film, and I mean, they had actors on stage and everything, but you learned nothing. I mean, it was just like, aren't we excited about this movie that's coming out? It's going to be great. Here's a few still photos and this one little animation that we did, and but you left there maybe being excited for the film, but you still didn't know much about what it was going to be. So. Yeah.
When you're sort of recording for the video games, it's, a lot of like shouting and punching and kicking and stuff like that. And then the show is sort of more quiet dialogue. Which one do you sort of prefer doing? The sort of heavy acting of yelling and screaming and punching, or sort of the more meticulous dialogue of just talking?
I mean, I appreciate the scripted dialogue because it's well crafted, and there's like pauses and there's a certain arc, which you do sometimes find that in the cutscenes on the video games. I do like, though, in the video games, I do kind of like the idea that I'm talking to the player, right? Like there's a fan, there's a player, there's a Dragon Ball fan that Beerus is yelling at that moment. And I don't know why. I mean, I don't ever get to see those, I guess unless I pulled up video or something of a Twitch stream of somebody playing the game. But I don't know. I always feel like that's the other character in that scene is the player, in their, living room, like cussing at Beerus or whatever, like having that experience, which is cool. So, but the games are an interesting thing. I mean, they are they canon or not? I mean, they certainly complement.
Yeah, I don't know.
In many cases, they certainly flesh out stories or side stories that seem to be relevant. They certainly flesh out your experience of Dragon Ball. So to that degree, I think it's great. It's great to do it because I get to do Beerus. I mean, that's the thing is like, we'll do a movie or we'll do, back when we were working on Super, that was great. And then it was over. But it does seem like at least once a year-ish, we're coming, they're coming out with a new game of some kind. I think the last one I did is and I haven't seen it around, but it's like a handheld, it's a phone game basically.
Right, yeah.
Whatever that last one is. So I was like, well, that's interesting.
I see advertisements for it all the time. I don't actually know what it's called, so... But I know the one you're talking about.
Yep. That's a shame that I can't remember. But.
So do you not play much of the Dragon Ball Z video games, or sort of do you not play?
I have it. I have it. We have some of the games on the console, and I have kids, and they play it, and that's fine. And so I would, I don't know. I'm sure it would be fine. I'm sure I would enjoy it. But in some ways, like going to work, I don't play games all the time. I think the last one I really got into was Breath of the Wild. I'm really excited for the sequel to come out. I think it's going to be amazing. But that's kind of my speed these days.
So what do your kids think of your work in Dragon Ball Z? Are they, completely mind blown on it, or do they just not really care?
Well, I wouldn't say they're mind blown, and we'll go through periods. There was a time when my youngest daughter, wanted me to do his voice all the time, and of course we were watching. They were watching Dragon Ball Super, and that's a fun show. I mean, it's a fun show when Dad's not in it. It's a show like as a parent. You begin to sift, if you're conscientious, you begin to sift what your kids are allowed to watch. And a lot of it is, if my eyes are bleeding or I'm just like, when I'm watching something that's designed for kids, some, Despicable Me 4 or whatever, it's just like, like, do I have to slog through this again? And then there's other things that are produced for for a younger audience. I'll just say it like that, or for a youthful audience. And I'm not trying to insult the Dragon Ball audience. I'm just saying that I think Dragon Ball, I don't mind my kids watching it. I realize there's some adult humor in it, but for the most part, it's something my kids can watch. And if the adult humor that's in there, it's mostly over their heads anyway.
Yeah.
For me, it's fun to see them because they're laughing and giggling, and I realize this is it. This is the audience, right? They're reacting to the work that was done, to the voice acting and to everything, and I can see that they're in rapt attention, and so that's pretty cool. It's like getting to watch young fans get made, and you sort of see how that's happening. That happens everywhere, and but they wouldn't care that I was doing it if they didn't like the show. Right. You see what I mean?
Yeah. So you haven't shown them the scene in Attack on Titan where Miche gets chewed in half or anything like that?
Nah, I haven't gone out of my way to do that. I just, I prefer to let them find that stuff on their own, right. Pretty much. I think some parents just, like, if they're okay with their kids watching anime, and that's fine. But what I as a parent understand is that there's a lot of different types of content within anime, and so I realize that certain titles for my kids are just off limits, or they're not ready for. Yeah. And I think actually Attack on Titan's a great show, but my younger kids aren't ready for that. So
yeah, it's a weird range between, like, it's all under the umbrella of anime, but something like Dragon Ball Super where the most it gets is just like a bit of blood, whereas Attack on Titan is like people getting torn in half, and like there's, you know, nudity in some animes, and like it's a wide range.
Yeah, and even like I mentioned Black Butler earlier. I mean, I've been at conventions where the mom will come up with the daughter who's enwrapped with Black Butler, and it's like she's a 10 or 11-year-old, and I'm like thinking, I'm like, you haven't watched this, have you? Like, you don't know, like, there's some weird stuff in this. Like, I wouldn't, you know, but yeah, I'm not telling other parents what to do, but hey, parents, you know, like, be aware, man. Like, know what your kids are watching. Like, be aware.
Yeah.
You know, watch it with them. Answer questions. Be interested in what they're interested in. But, you know, make sure it's age appropriate.
Yeah. What are some of the coolest experiences you've had at a convention, whether it be at like a panel or like sort of at an autograph signing or like a cool cosplay that you saw? What were some of the best moments from a convention you've had?
I think on the topic of Dragon Ball and Beerus in general, like I've seen some really excellent Beerus cosplay, and I don't know why, but it was strangely flattering when I saw it, and you know, and even though I knew like this character would exist whether I was voicing, you know, the character or not. So this cosplay would exist whether I was voicing it or not. But I just thought it was really cool to see how and a lot of those cosplayers would want to come up and talk to me about the character, and they always want me to see the character. Like, you know, I'm kind of like the ambassador for the character in the English language, and so I'm always happy to see, you know, cosplayers are interesting, and they put a lot of work and effort into what they're doing, and sometimes it's as easy as just throwing on a jacket and a hat and, you know, a toy weapon, and then you're in character as, you know, Rick from The Walking Dead or something. But for the Beerus cosplayers, I mean, I've seen some elaborate costume, even like skin paint, you know, to make them look purple. That's really impressive. So I mean, I think the coolest thing, though, this is totally different. The coolest thing that ever happened at a convention for me. This is a story I guess I'm going to be telling for like forever. I was doing a convention in Glasgow. There was a young man who was actually volunteering with the convention, and he was helping me at my table, and his girlfriend was helping Ian Sinclair, but she was at the next table. They were at the next table over, and so I was getting to know them, and I realized they'd been together for a few years, and I was just talking to him about being married and how, like, you know, like it's not for everyone, but it sounds like you guys are, you know, and I don't know why. I mean, I wasn't trying to poke my nose into his business, but I was like, what's holding you back, man? You know, like she's a great girl. Like you guys are awesome. You know, like, and I just was trying to be very encouraging to him. He was asking a lot of questions about life and we just got deep. I mean, brother, we got deep. I mean, I thought this would be a conversation we would have over a couple of pints, but we were just sitting there at the table. We weren't busy the whole time. And so I just got to know this guy. Really sweet guy. I mean, like we had a lot to talk about. We talked about other things and music and whatnot, but I guess some things that I said really got to him. And before I knew it, he turned around and dropped on a knee and proposed to this girl. And it was amazing. And they just, you know, that was a couple of years ago. They, you know, because of COVID, they had to postpone their wedding, but they are in fact married. They just got back from their honeymoon, as far as I understand. So I don't want to take too much credit, but that, you know, I was involved on some level at kind of helping him, you know, push him over the edge, and you know, good for him. But anyway, that's cool. That's life stuff. That's family stuff. It doesn't have anything to do with the work, but it has to do with people and kind of happiness and something that makes a difference, right? We all want to make a difference. And as actors, it's kind of hard sometimes to see what we're doing. There's always like a self-perception. There's a you know, self-absorption problem. There's confidence issues with different actors. But sometimes you just knock all that stuff off and just make it about kind of relationships and meeting people and just trying to do good work and not getting too caught up in the celebrity stuff. I'm an anti-celebrity. I mean, really, and I'm not saying that to like make myself sound better. I just don't identify. It's always weird to me when I show up for something and they're treating me like I'm special. You know, when I get off the plane, they pick me up for a show and there's just all this red carpet treatment, and I realize they do that and they have to do that for all of their guests, but I always feel a little awkward about it. And I think it's just because I've never really leaned into that whole, look at me, I'm famous, because I don't really think of myself in those terms. And I'm not very famous. So, I don't know what to do with that. What am I supposed to,
Yeah, I don't know. I was, I'm not saying that you're super famous, and I'm also not saying that you're not super famous, but when I messaged you on Instagram and you got back, I was like, holy shit, like, I'm talking to Beerus, I'm going to interview Beerus, this is insane. So
it's crazy, right? I mean, some actors that I'm friends with are quite famous, and it is strange for them because they have to function differently in the world,
right,
because so many people recognize them. And so that's absolutely true. And I think part of that kind of scares me. Like, part of me feels like I don't want that. Like, I actually like, if I want to go to the hardware store or the grocery store or anywhere and just be an anonymous, guy. I mean, that's the way it is most of the time. There was a time when I was on Walking Dead a lot and I would get recognized. People would look at me like, because I don't live in LA, so it's not like you're in a LA or a city where people are used to seeing famous people.
Yeah.
I'm in North Texas, so for me to get recognized here is a very strange thing, and so it takes them by surprise, but it always takes me by surprise. Like, who do you think I am? I don't know. No, I'm nobody. You must have me mistaken for someone else.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things with with Walking Dead, it's an on-camera appearance, whereas Beerus and King Cold and Miche is like, it's your voice, so people don't really recognize you from your voice as much as they do as you actually look.
But now with voice actors and social media and the conventions, like every time I get invited to a convention, of course there's a promotional thing where they drop, and there's that promo card that's got the face with all the characters. Every show is the same. They all do the same thing. And so I think for a lot of actors, people are starting to, especially within fandom of anime and voice acting, if you're a big fan of a show, there's a good chance that you know what the voice actors look like, particularly in anime. So,
do you have sort of any traditions or habits that you do to get you into the mood or sort of get you pumped up for doing a voice acting gig, or even just a regular gig where it's like just a habit that you do or a song that you listen to get you in the excited mood?
No, not really. I mean, not for anime, really. I would say for like on-camera work, there's a little more intensity about it in preparation, and you're walking around in costume, essentially, so there is the idea of becoming that character physically. For voiceover, I don't have to wear anything to do the role. I don't have to wear anything in particular. I can be as sloppy as I want to be. I can wear a suit with a necktie and dress shoes and a top hat, and it wouldn't matter, right? I mean, it might give me a certain feeling, but my thing is I'm an actor. I don't need to do that. And in voice acting, we just don't do that. So when you're presenting yourself physically to the camera, which, I mean, the camera picks up everything. There is a sense in which it's a bit like theater, where you do feel like I need to kind of arrange my neurons to fire in the general direction of this character's mode, and so I have to get out of my own head. And there's nothing specific I do other than it's almost a kind of like, see, if I said meditation, that would sound weird and it would evoke a certain image, and that's not at all what I'm talking about. But there is something that I learned in theater, and it's not even something it's easy for me to describe, but it's just something I do inwardly. There's a certain focus, a certain way that I focus, and it sort of quiets my mind and expels distractions, if that makes sense. And it allows me to kind of drop into the head of the character that I'm playing. It's not spiritual or magical or anything. It really is just, it's more about focus and focusing and sort of breathing into the character. But it's not about shedding nervousness or doing anything strange to become the character. It really is just breathing in and breathing out and focusing on the text and the script and the given circumstances, right?
I'm not expecting you to promise me anything, but can you please promise me in your next voice acting gig you wear a suit and a top hat? Because that would be amazing.
Yeah. The thing is, the problem is you'd never know it. I could tell you that I did, and you would. Maybe I'll just tell you that I did, and you'll be thrilled, and I'll be like, "Yeah, it was great, man. I put the tie on, and I was just so in character. I walked in, and I just nailed it, and it would be a great story." And then no one would ever know that I didn't do it. But I could see how, under certain circumstances, it might help some people. It just doesn't. For me, if it's a superficial thing, then it doesn't penetrate the work. So.
Well, if you ever do it, I'm going to need photo proof. So it would just be amazing in like a behind the scenes photo if they're like, a photo of Sean Schimmel doing his acting, a photo of Christopher Sabat doing his acting, and then you're just in like a full fancy suit. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Especially as Beerus.
Yeah.
And especially if it were like kind of a purple suit.
Yes, that would be amazing.
Well, when I started doing promotional stuff for Dragon Ball, when we went to New York for Comic-Con a couple of years ago, and we were doing Broly and all this stuff, I did look for some like ties and shirts that kind of had the purple and some Beerusy colors, and I had like a little handkerchief. And the guy that was selling me, he was like, "What are these colors? What are you trying to do?" Because it wasn't, like purple and orange and blue. He was like, I was like, "You don't understand." And I showed him a picture of Beerus, like kind of a, in full, head to toe.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, okay. All right." So he's like, "Okay, I'll let you get away with it."
But on a normal day, he wouldn't allow it.
I thought the stuff that I bought looked really good. Like, I think it looked really good.
Yeah.
But
So when you're voice acting, it's, I assume, different in every studio, but do you usually record in your own isolated booth or alongside the other actors?
Yeah, that's typically, voice work is done one performer at a time. And so almost every show you've ever heard in ADR work, which is where we're, doing the dubs, those are all done separately. So you hear a crowd of voices that are different people in the same scene. Typically those are not done. Now, there are exceptions to this. In prelay animation, which is when you get your voice work out of the way before it's animated, that sometimes or often is done in groups, small groups. But I've talked to some of the voice actors that actually are the Japanese voice actors that do Dragon Ball, and they often actually do record. They'll all come in and they'll have a session. And they're all scheduled together, and they'll pop in and out of, front of the microphones at different times if it's a group scene.
Right.
So that's kind of fun to know. But it just doesn't really happen here with anime. And the only exception to that is when they do Foley.
Right.
Which are the group scenes that are just chatter. Sometimes they'll have, used to before COVID, I don't know how they're doing it now, but there would be 4 to 6 actors that they would bring in to just go through an entire episode of a show. And anytime there's a market or school lunchroom kind of a situation,
right, yeah.
you need to hear groups of people. So sometimes you might have a studio with a one mic or maybe 2 mics, but you might have 6 people in there all on mic at the same time.
So as you mentioned before, usually with voice acting in either video games or cartoons and anime and stuff like that, you're reacting to a visual on screen that's already been animated. Is it easier to do it once it's been animated and sort of try and sync your dialogue up to the audio, or is it easier when it's just you don't have that visual reference?
Well, I think it's much easier if you don't have to track to the visual reference. One thing that the anime gives us English voice actors is it helps give us the contours of the character. Like we're not necessarily trying to create an entirely new performance.
Yeah.
If you think of a Pixar Disney film, a lot of times they're able to create the character performance because of the work that the voice actor did.
Yeah.
A great example of this would be Aladdin, a Disney film, right, with Robin Williams, right? Rest in peace. But that's going to be an example where you just have a tour de force performance around which to animate and build. We just don't, we don't have that. Now, I would like to think that if we had that opportunity to be the first voice of an anime, that we could in fact do that. And in fact, I've been able to do that with Ruby when I do Jacques Schnee for Rooster Teeth, because that's all prelay animation. I'm not looking at anything. I'm just reading lines. So they're building a character around my performance in that case. And I think I would rather do it if I could. I think I would rather do it that way. But I do find the anime helpful. I find the work, the animation, very helpful.
Yeah. In
creating my interpretation of that role.
Yeah. So when you're hired for something like Attack on Titan or Ruby, where it's kind of, I don't know how early, or I don't know sort of when you joined those shows, but how much sort of research do you do for a show like that that's either pre-existing or has sort of source material that you have reference to?
I don't always do a ton of research. I do try to get a sense of the tone of the show. I don't need to know the whole backstory. I don't necessarily need to know I don't need to go read the manga necessarily. But sometimes I'll get an audition opportunity for something that looks interesting. I've been doing this long enough now that it's very rare that anything looks all that unique or different. Right? Like you can kind of instantly see when you get a show, oh, this is a mecha show, oh, this is a harem show, or this is a type of show that is a pre-existing trope or genre, and you can be sure that the characters and the story arcs are very generally going to fall within a certain pattern. And honestly, those breakdowns often come with pretty good character descriptions, so you have an idea of what you're doing. But sometimes I do find the show intriguing. I'll go online. I'll see if there's trailers. I'll see if I can find it. I've done that on occasion where I've looked for episodes of a show that is about to be dubbed, and usually just because for some reason there's something about it that intrigues me, and I want to know more. And then I do, in those cases, I feel like that. But I do that in preparation to audition. Once I have the role, generally I think you get to spend enough time, with the anime on the screen, and kind of with the words in front of you, you get a pretty good sense of how that's going to go, So
when, because you're sort of adapting from a Japanese dialogue and things that you have to kind of keep close to that script, what was the show that you didn't really have to do that and you were given the most freedom to improvise?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. Well, here's the deal. The improvisation, particularly in anime, it has to happen around the contours of what's already there on screen, right? And so we may or may not listen to the Japanese voice actor to take a cue there, but we can't get away from what's already there on screen. And so it has to make sense and be consistent with what the viewer is seeing. Now you do have a lot of wiggle room, and I think there's a lot of room for interpretation sometimes with character voices. Like a big warrior god doesn't have to talk like this all the time. To me, that's so cliche. Big guys, and they don't talk like that all the time. In fact, some big guys have kind of a high pitched voice. You can still be a tough guy and not have a big, booming, character voice. So I think there's a lot more room, and I'm always grateful to have a director that's like, yeah, let's go for something different. We don't have to sound like that guy or whatever. There just isn't a ton of room to improvise unless your character is off screen. Right. And you also don't want, in this day and age, you don't want, we have a very sophisticated fan base. If we change anything, they're going to know about it.
Yeah.
And we have done that. And they our fans typically appreciate a really tight dub that has been scripted in a way that is very close to what they say or what they think is the original. Now, what the irony, of course, is that a lot of fans don't think about is that, look, if you don't speak Japanese and fluently, you can't say that you have experienced the script by just watching a dub.
Yeah.
Now, I do give some credence if that fan has also read the manga, but again, it's gone through a translation. So unless you speak and read Japanese very well and you understand all the idioms and all of that script has gone through 2 or 3 layers of translation work. What you're getting is our best version of staying as close to the story as possible, but you're never going to get a word-for-word translation. It just would not make sense if we tried to do that. Yeah, well, so that's a weird answer to a question you didn't ask. You asked a totally different question, and I gave you a different answer.
No, that's fine. I enjoyed the answer, so...
Good. We aim to please. We want to keep our audience interested, right?
Yeah. Do you have sort of any specific lines or quotes, like not necessarily from Beerus, but just sort of any of your voice acting characters, any like specific quotes that you really like?
Yeah, I just don't have them all memorized, but I will sometimes write them down, and sometimes when I'm asked like a cameo or something like that, and somebody will say, I want this line, they'll either mention the line that they want to hear, or they'll just ask me, and I'll go on and I'll look up quotes. But I get a lot of that for like Krieg for Borderlands.
Right.
I got the shiniest meat bicycle, and that's an iconic line for that character. But there are many, many others. Taste the bloody hatred, and with Beerus, it's funny because he has a lot of cool and funny lines. But the one thing that fans want to hear me say the most is simply Hakai, just like that.
What is that?
Hakai is his sort of signature move. It means destroy.
Right.
And that's what he does. He's a destroyer. And at the moment in the series, Dragon Ball Super, where he destroys Zamasu, there was a bit of a question about whether he would say Hakai, which is the Japanese word for destroy. I think our script actually said destroy. And I knew that the fans wanted to hear Hakai, and I think we wanted to be able to establish that as something that we were going to say in Japanese rather than just anglicize it and just have him always say destroy whenever he destroys something. Like, no, let's make it a move, kind of like Kamehameha. Let's make it his thing. The fans will know. They're not stupid. He says Hakai when he destroys something in the Japanese. We're just going to say it and it'll be the thing. And so we did. And so anytime Beerus, in the English dub, uses his Hakai, he says Hakai instead of destroy.
Yeah.
Because it's just cool.
Yeah, before we mentioned sort of the anonymity of what he's saying is sort of more menacing. So yeah, if you say a Japanese word that you don't actually know what it means, that's more menacing than just saying destroy, because it kind of sounds more cheesy if he just says destroy.
Yeah, and I don't know if him saying Hakai lands the same for the Japanese audience, because to them he's just saying destroy, right? But because it's a Japanese word and it sounds cool, for us when he says it really lands. Like, here he comes. Is he gonna do it? He's gonna do it. Ah, he did it. He said Hakai. And I get fans all the time that come up to me at conventions and they want me to Hakai them, or they want me to sign something and put Hakai on it.
Nice.
So it's really become a thing, which would not be at all if we had simply said destroy.
Destroy,
Destroy. What is that? So
yeah, so what are sort of, not necessarily voice acting, but just sort of your acting career, what are some of your fondest memories and sort of favorite moments from a recording session that you had?
Recording sessions,
or filming, like just sort of a day on set.
Yeah, I mean, for me, just working with other actors, which is something you don't get to do as much in studio, but working certainly live action and in theater. I mean, just that energy that you have with another performer. Part of the challenge of doing, working on mic in a studio is kind of like trying to find that energy, because that energy really feeds a performance. And so you may not have it. I also enjoy the camaraderie, when you're on set. Those times between scenes and when you break for lunch and everybody's just kind of, decompressing a little bit, and then you got to get back to it. Those are the experiences that I enjoy. Certainly working on The Walking Dead. Everybody on that show is such an artist, both on and off camera. I mean, there's the camera guys, the special effects, makeup artists. Everybody's working so hard to create the look of that show, you know, so that when you watch it, and any show that you watch that's well done, I mean, there's something going on behind the scenes to give your favorite show a unique look, so that when you turn it on, it looks right. You know, even the color correction and the color grading for the images that you see are going to be different from show to show. Some shows are going to look brighter or just consistently be dark. The sound mixing might be different. The color palettes that make up the wardrobe choices that characters wear. I mean, I was working on Breaking Bad, and if you were to go into a fitting, you would see color palettes that were assigned to each character. And so every character that you can think of on that show, and in most shows where you have a competent wardrobe supervisor as well as a competent costume designer, they're typically working from a palette of colors. And so that's why if you really pay attention, you'll see that a certain character always seems to kind of have maybe red and yellow worked into their character, and this other character is kind of always in, you know, browns and blues, and it'll be consistent because that's the rule, that's the way they've designed it. And so that's why, and so anyway, my point is that it's fun to work with artists like that who are thinking in that way, because you feel like they're really, really competent, and I get to work with them briefly or for a series.
It would certainly help when everyone is passionate about the project and people actually care about the work that they're putting out, so that can definitely help the experience.
Yeah, and so when you're working on stage or on television or whatever, on camera, you have that experience of kind of working with a big chunk of the artists, you know, at the same time, and you're rubbing elbows with those people. And obviously with voiceover work, you know, so much of that work is done elsewhere, right? The script writing and the obviously the animation. And I suppose if you're an animator working for a big studio, then you probably are working in a creative space with a lot of other artists. And so for them, that's, you know, I'm sure that's a really rewarding experience. But for me as an actor, that happens when I'm doing a play or when I'm working on camera.
Before you mentioned The Walking Dead and your sort of work on The Walking Dead, when you joined the show, was being a zombie and sort of, spoiler alert, by the way, to anyone that hasn't seen The Walking Dead, Tobin dies and becomes a zombie. Was that something that you sort of hoped would happen, that you would sort of get in the zombie makeup eventually?
Well, no, because I knew if I became a zombie, that would be my last episode, right?
Yeah.
You know, I'm not coming back to be a zombie. You know, nobody comes back to be a zombie for the most part. But I was glad the way it happened in the episode that I was in, because I'd known a lot of actors who had died on the show, and oftentimes their deaths were very quick and sudden, and then they were gone.
Yeah.
And they built the whole show, in a sense. That episode was around my character's death and resurrection as a zombie, and then second death at the hands of well, I don't want to give too much away.
You can give it away.
In case anybody who's watching this show actually hasn't seen it and intends to, but I did the show for 25 episodes over 4 seasons, and so when it happened, I knew it was time, and I was fine with it. I mean, it's always a surprise when you find out, well, your time is coming to a close.
They walk over to you with the zombie makeup, and you're like, what's happening?
Yeah. Well, I knew going in, obviously, because they actually called me. Scott Gimple, the showrunner, called me about a week or 2 weeks before,
right?
Just to say, hey man, letting you know this is going to be it, and you know, appreciate great work, all this stuff. You know, it was fine. We had a nice conversation.
That was really nice of him.
And then it was a great episode for me. I mean, I was very busy. I worked all week and got to do the zombie thing, so fun. Yeah. The character got to go out with his boots on, which is always how I wanted it. You know, I felt like this is how he should go. And he was fighting and, you know, shooting guns and hitting bad guys. And
I stopped watching, not around that time, but sort of a little bit after Negan was introduced, and then kind of fell out of the show. So I didn't see. I saw a bit of your character, but I didn't actually see the ending or like the death of him until sort of researching for the interview. So it's like, it was a bit surprising that's like, oh yeah, I know him. Oh, he dies. Like, it was sort of a bit sudden.
Yeah, well, it was a long time coming. Like I said, 4 seasons, and you know, there were times for me, certainly by like season 7, I just wasn't sure what the plan was for this character.
Yeah.
You know? And my friend Kendrick Green is still on the show, and he also plays an Alexandrian. And he's not dead yet.
Cool.
But I don't think that they have really developed his character much either. So he's kind of still knocking around doing kind of the same stuff that we were doing, you know, couple of lines here and there, a couple of, you know, shooting guns, and, you know, just always there, either in the background, and maybe says a few things, and he's still kicking, still on the show. So
what's his character's name?
That's I just, you know, it's everybody has 2 names, right? It's like their character, and then their Kendrick plays. Who do you play? It's not Eric. I don't know why I think
Aaron?
Eric. Aaron, not Aaron.
Not Aaron.
No. You know, but it's Sonequa Martin Green's husband, and of course she's moved on to Star Trek. But you know, they were on the show together. They were never together really in the show or on the scenes, but you know, they were often, you know, they were in Atlanta at the same time doing the show, and of course she left the show and then she took the Star Trek job, and I think that shoots maybe in Vancouver. Kendrick and I used to kind of joke that it would be funny if they ever built an episode around he and I doing like a supply run and then getting stuck somewhere and having to fight our way back.
Yeah.
You know, we would sit around as these kind of semi like minor characters, you know, like fantasizing about, they're gonna write a big episode for the 2 of us, and you know, it's gonna be great. And you know, of course that never happened. But.
You always wonder, like, as a side character, you're like, what if like I killed Daryl? That'd be cool. Like, sort of what if I was the main character?
It's hard not to think about like what would it be like if like my you know, like they really start writing for my character. Instead of just, you know, having me be the other guy in the scene. Yeah. The problem with The Walking Dead, of course, is that too many characters in the first place. Like, there's just so many characters that they have to juggle and keep in the air and make it interesting. And, you know, I came in at the end of season 5, and that was a collision of characters.
Yeah, you know, like a whole new town.
Yeah, I mean, it really was. There was no way. I think, you know, Tobin had a much longer leash than anybody ever thought he would. I think it's because I like to think it's because they caught a little spark between Tobin and Carol. Yeah. Between Melissa and myself early on. They thought, well, maybe we could do something with that. That's interesting, and they did in season 6. Yeah. But it wasn't terribly popular, obviously, with a lot of fans, simply because. You know, obviously, The Walking Dead has amongst its fans some very hardcore Daryl Carol shippers. Yeah. And so anything that doesn't fit that is verboten. So.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that even though there wasn't sort of a Daryl Carol sort of triangle fight or something like that, it was cool that they treated your character well sort of up until the end. So it was still nice of them, even though there were some missed opportunities. They still handled it well enough.
Yeah. I think Tobin was a guy. People would say, hey, you know, you would have people writing about this character Tobin. You know, who is he? What's he all about? You know, he's cool. You know, there are people that were actually fans of Tobin because they kind of, you know, I think they maybe understood what we were trying to do with the character, but they also were projecting a little bit of like, he's an everyman. You know, He's like I would be if I were in The Walking Dead. He's not like a superhero guy. He's just like a regular guy trying to make it, you know. And he's like trying to figure out how does he fit in and survive. And I think people dig that. People dig that kind of character in a show like The Walking Dead, which is basically the Avengers but with zombies and no superpowers. So
yeah, just finally, what is some advice that you would give to someone who's either trying to get into voice acting or just sort of in that field? What's some advice that you could give to an up-and-comer?
Yeah, sure. Take some classes, first of all. Don't think that you can just go and sign up on a list somewhere and you're going to get called in and suddenly you're going to be acting. It doesn't work that way. And it sounds harsh. We often lead with that kind of advice to say, you know, it's not easy. You know, don't take the easy way because it doesn't exist. And sometimes we have to say that because I think we meet a lot of people that are fans and they love they love anime so much that they want to be a part of it. And it seems like the easy way for them to be a part of it is to do what we do. But you asked me right up front what it was like for me starting out, how to get in, and what was the first thing I told you? I talked about acting in theater in high school, and then I told you I went to the University of Houston School of Theater, so I did theater for years. I mean, and for me, that's my experience. And I'm not saying that everybody has to do exactly what I did. It doesn't have to look like what I did at all, but it should include training and spending some time like really researching the business of voice acting. Like, is this something I would ask them, is this something you want to do as a hobby? Do you have another job where you're making money at? Because you better. Anime dubbing doesn't pay a lot. It really doesn't. And very few actors can completely make their living just doing anime. Now, you can make a living doing voiceover, but that's going to include a lot of things that aren't anime. It's going to include commercials and films, and ultimately, I would say, if you're going to be a professional voice actor, ultimately you're going to want to have an agent. So you're going to work backwards from there. How do you get an agent's attention? Well, you're good, first of all. You've got good maybe footage. They see that you've been in classes. Maybe you've studied for a year or more with a teacher that they're aware of. But mostly an agent, unless they're in a mode of wanting to develop a young talent that has little to no experience, they're mostly going to want to sign a talent that is ready to book, meaning they've got materials, they've got, if you're wanting to do on camera, you've got to have great pictures, a great demo reel. If you're a voice actor, you've got to have obviously good demo reels. There's not just like a door that you walk through and suddenly you're doing this. I know Amazon has some really great books on the business of voice acting. I think Harlan Hogan's written a book. The one I like to recommend is James Alberger wrote a book called The Art of Voice Acting. It was a book that I read early on to kind of familiarize myself with what to expect and what I should be doing. But take classes, talk to other actors, talk to the teachers of the class, ask them questions, talk about next steps, ask for honest feedback, be receptive, don't be too thin-skinned about someone telling you that, hey, you really need to work on this, you're not ready yet. Hopefully you work with somebody who's willing to say, I see the talent that you have, you're not ready to get hired right now, but if you keep working and you are diligent about it, you could get there. If you really are just starting out, then you need to be in a class, and I also recommend improv classes. I think improv is just great. I'm a big fan of improv, and I also think that improv classes are really good for actors in general, and so I think they're good for voice actors too.
Yeah, that was a great answer. It's good. It's very interesting, and I'm glad that you brought it up, that you have to have, you can't be sort of too thin-skinned to hear criticism, because it's a very saturated market, and there are so many actors trying to get the one role that you're after. So it's like, you just got to take it as it comes, that maybe you weren't the best person for that role.
Tons of rejection.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm really glad that you mentioned that it wasn't just, oh yeah, how I got Beerus. I walked into Funimation and I got the part immediately. Like, you had to get so many years of experience. You didn't just have the audition given to you. You had to work your ass off for it.
I was nearly 20 years in the business before Beerus came along for me. Now, I'm not saying it's like that for all actors. I mean, there's a lot of young voice actors that are working in shows like Ruby and others, My Hero Academia and whatnot, that are younger than me, and they haven't been doing it as long as I have, and they lucked into a great show that's an A title that was going to be gangbusters anyway, and they're playing a great role. I mean, I think there's a lot of humility, I think, about being an anime voice actor, because it's not like we're on the front end and we build the show around us and we're the ones that made it famous. My Hero Academia was huge in Japan coming over here. Anybody that got on that show was going to, was going to rise with it, right? That's just how it is sometimes. You might be working 5, 10, 15 years doing great roles and doing different parts here and there. If I hadn't done Beerus, I guess I would still be doing anime and I would be doing other things, but it's the one main thing that everybody wants to talk to me about. I can't do an interview like this without somebody wanting to talk about Beerus, and a lot. And prior to Beerus, if I were to do an interview like this, they would kind of talk about my range of characters, and they might talk about, well, what about this one or that? But you know, we wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about one show.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, it's definitely changed the perception that people have of me. I'm not just a guy who's an actor who also happens to do anime. I'm now the guy that does Beerus to a lot of people. And so that's different.
Yeah.
Very different from me from when I started out. So
Yeah, well, it also just goes to show that you're in a lot of different sort of wide, very sort of trying to think of the word. Like, you're in a lot of shows pretty much, and it's like I was a fan of Dragon Ball Z, Attack on Titan, Walking Dead before I found out about the fact that you're in them all. So it's like, it just goes to show that you're in these big shows not because people recognize you, but like just because of your talent.
Well, I hope that's true. It's, I mean, it's also part of it is just persistence and you know, being stubborn, not really giving myself an out, which is, you know, the advice is always have a backup plan, and I would absolutely tell my kids or anybody that's getting in this to have a backup plan. That's not a bad thing, you know, but like I really didn't have a major backup plan. I kept pushing and was able to find success. And it's not always perfect. It's not always consistent. You can do it if you work hard and you have some measure of talent. You have to be a good actor. You know, as we talk about people asking about, well, how do you get into voice acting? Well, I say, are you an actor? Are you competent? And I don't say it like that, but that's really the underlying question is, can you wrap your head around the business side of this? Because a lot of what we do to pursue the craft and to make a living isn't the acting part. It's auditioning, or it's, you know, doing billing for a client, or it's other things. And none of that is acting specifically, except for the auditioning. But you have to do it. You have to do it all, and you have to do it well. Yeah. Best of luck to anybody that wants to try it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if these sort of situations have happened to you, but for me, as sort of someone that doesn't act and someone that sort of doesn't really go into voice acting, it's kind of scary watching people in interviews and meet and greets and stuff like that saying, you know, oh, I quit my job to get into voice acting. And it's like, it's a very risky thing, and sometimes it pays off, and I hope that it pays off for those people, but it's one of those things that it's very scary as an outsider watching that.
I feel like no one should quit their job to get into voice acting. They should quit their job when voice acting is enough to replace whatever they're making. Right? You've got bills. You got to make your bills. Keep doing that day job, man. You know, like find ways to make it flexible, but you can certainly, I mean, a lot of, you know, studios have night sessions. You know, you can do this at night in many ways, in many cases. You know, it's one thing to say I quit my job and I moved to LA, or what. Of course you quit your job to move to LA. You know, unless you work from home, you're going to have to do something like that. But just to say I'm dropping everything and now I'm going to start pursuing voice acting. No, it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Hilary Haig, who was a very well-known name in anime voicing, she never quit her day job, and she's good. I mean, she's really good. I mean, everything she ever did was great. But she didn't want the instability. She had a really good day job, and she kept it, you know, and she still was able to do some great roles. So have a backup if you can.
Exactly.
You know?
It's very nerve-wracking watching people say that they've left their job to pursue voice acting, because even if they have, you know, an acting gig in January, there's a chance that they won't have another one for the rest of the year. So that sort of that risk of not having money for a full year is very scary to witness people doing that.
That's why I don't just do voice acting. I mean, I do work on camera, and I don't just work on camera. I couldn't survive. I don't have a single source of income, right? If you looked at me doing my taxes at the end of the year, it's crazy, because there's 57 different ways that I might have made money the year before, and they're all a little piece, right? You wouldn't look at any one of those and go, oh man, he's killing it. But you know, you add it up, and then you're like, oh, okay, I could see how that you could make a living. But no one thing is enough to sustain, you know, whatever I make from Funimation And you might think I make a ton. I don't. Whatever I make from Funimation is a small piece of the pie. And I have to absolutely keep working in other areas and other venues. Luckily, most all of it is acting related, but don't approach this as I want to be a voice actor for anime.
Yeah.
That's not going to sustain you in your life. Do you want to be an actor? Do you want to be a voice actor who is also an actor? Are you willing to do other kinds of work while you're also doing anime? Are you willing to learn to do other kinds of work? That's the way you approach it. It's not just, hey, I want to be an actor that's a voice anime and I'm going to make, $75,000 a year or something, working for Funimation or one of the others. It's not the way it works. You might do that in LA if you get on a big show that's like a network show, like, The Simpsons or Family Guy or whatever. Then sure, you're going to be making a lot more money. But most of us who you would talk to who are working for Funimation or Sentai or other studios, and we're not living in LA, like this just is, again, it's a fun job. It's not a lucrative job. So
that's a great point to end it on. So yeah, thank you, Jason Douglas. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to, we talked about a lot. We talked Attack on Titan, Dragon Ball Z, voice acting, camera acting, theater, just a lot of things we covered in this interview. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join me.
Very wide ranging. Thanks, Kyle. Appreciate you. And, to the fan, thanks for listening. If you're watching, follow me on, I'm on Instagram, Jason Douglas. I'm Mr. Jason Douglas on Twitter, and there's a Facebook page if you want to stay caught up with what I'm up to. I think I'm Mr. Jason Douglas on Cameo, and I also just joined Memo. I think it's called Memo, which is apparently a popular Cameo type platform. It's more popular like in Europe and other parts of the world, so I don't know. I haven't gotten any bookings on that one yet, but I am on Cameo. I have been for about a year and a half, and give me a buzz.
Yep.